So to start off the training, I wanted to turn my time over to Karen Bybee, who is the Vice President on the board who is over chapters, and she's going to share a little bit about herself and why she volunteered with BYU Alumni. Thanks, Karen, over to you.
Thanks, Kelly. Kelly asked me to kind of share my story of how I got involved with BYU Alumni. So we have to go back to 2011. It's April of 2011, and I have one son that had attended BYU and was on a mission, and I had another son that had been accepted to BYU but was probably not going to go to BYU. And in the middle of an afternoon, I got a phone call from Mac Epps, who was the East Region Director. Mac and I had been friends for many years, but I wouldn't say we were particularly close. We weren't in the same stake. We didn't run into each other. So it was kind of a surprise to get a phone call from him in the middle of the afternoon. And we just chit-chatted a little bit. And then he asked me if I would be willing to be the chair for the Washington, D.C. chapter. And I had to say, gosh, I don't even know, I didn't even realize that we didn't have a chapter. I had been to several things that turns out were management society functions, and there had been a chapter in DC, but it had kind of gone dormant, and Mac was trying to get things jump-started. So he had to kind of educate me from the very beginning about the difference between the management society and what BYU Alumni did, and why we needed a chapter, and why he was asking me to do it. So we talked at length about, did this involve fundraising, what kind of time commitment, what it was expected of me. And then I said, Mac, I need to just think about this a little bit. Let me get back to you tomorrow. And I thought about it. And the next day I called him back and I said, I'm so flattered you asked me, but quite frankly, I think my son is going to go elsewhere and is not going to go to BYU, and I'm going to need to put my energies into his new school and his new endeavor. But I'm flattered you asked me, and I tell you what, if for some reason he does come to BYU, then I would be willing to accept this. So let's fast forward, and that was fine. We left it at that. And then about 10 days later, it was senior lacrosse night, and my husband and I were escorting our son out onto the field, and they're reading the little bio that the players have written about themselves. And at the very end, it says, and in the fall, Cameron Holdaway will be attending Brigham Young University. And my husband and I practically just fell over where we were standing. We were so shocked that he had decided to go to BYU and hadn't told us and announced it in that way. And the next day, I called up Mac and I said, I told you that I would do this if my son chose to go to BYU, and he's made that decision, and so I would be happy to be your Washington, D.C. chapter chair. So that was kind of how I got involved. I really didn't know, quite frankly, what I was getting myself into and what all it entailed. But I gathered a great group of people around me, and I can say that in the 6 years that I have been involved with BYU Alumni, it has been one of the most rewarding experiences that I never knew I wanted to have. And it's been a tremendous experience to get to know the alumni in the area, to work with others from chapters, and to now be working in a different capacity. But I'm grateful, truly grateful, that Mac reached out to me and was patient enough to nurture me along and let me get to the place where I knew that this was the right thing for me to do. And it has blessed my life since. So I've been grateful for that opportunity. So, Callie, that's my story.
Thank you, Karen. That was very helpful. So just to give you a sense of what's going to happen for the rest of the training is you're going to get to listen to me for a little bit, and I'm going to talk about some strategies that can help you with recruiting and engagement. And then I have asked Kristen Morgan of the Washington Southwest chapter and Mark Walker of the Texas San Antonio chapter to spend a couple minutes talking to you about some things that they're doing in their region to help, because I know this is something a lot of you struggle with, and I just wanted to provide some different points of view. So I'm going to share my screen now and go back to the slideshow and then just talk you through this slide presentation. So we will skip over these two things. So the first question that I want to talk about is what drives people to volunteer. The easiest way to get volunteers is to ask. And I know some of you are like, I've asked so many people and they say no. But generally, when we're looking at sort of data about what helps people to volunteer, they need to be asked first. and a personal invitation is the best way to being asked. And I'll talk a bit more later about how we work on that personal invite. The second thing that will drive people to volunteer is an affiliation with the cause or belief system and understanding our purpose. I think on this, we're really lucky because we're dealing with BYU alumni, and most BYU alumni are already totally bought into the purpose of BYU, doing the good work at BYU and helping students at BYU and continuing that with our alumni. And then the last reason is the what's in it for me, right? So not all volunteer work is altruistic. There are people who do it for rewards. And some of it is to meet other people, it's to learn new skills, like sort of, let's say I wanted to learn more about social media, a vice chair would be a great way for me to learn more about social media, and then also a part of the team. So just understanding why people volunteer can sort of help you as you take the next steps to help people recruit them into your organization. So the hardest thing I think at the beginning stage is, what do we do to identify people who will volunteer with our organization? How do we get people to want to volunteer for BYU alumni, and where do we get their names? So one of the things that we do here at BYU Alumni is, with your chapter, you can request an updated alumni list. I think those alumni lists can be a bit overwhelming, right? You can get hundreds of names and it's not really clear how you can process those names. And so here are some things that can sort of help you narrow down that list so you don't need to make 1,000 calls, because that doesn't sound like the best use of people's time. So first, in terms of demographics, women ages 35 to 44 and 45 to 54 are the most likely to volunteer out of all demographics, and even more particularly women with college degrees. So luckily, when you're getting that alumni list, there are going to be women with college degrees on that list. And just so you can maybe thinking, I can only reach out to so many, that's a good place to start. The next place to start is people who give money to an organization are also more likely to volunteer than others. So the way that looks is, when you receive the alumni spreadsheet, there's those 2 columns at the beginning before we get into the information. And for those of you who have not seen this, email me later and I can talk you through it. The first column is dealing with people who have donated money to BYU. And that's an automatic flag that those people are more likely to give their time because they've already given their money. And then the second column is one that is people who have strong relationships with BYU. And as I showed on the other slide, is that people who are already sort of bought into your purpose are likely to volunteer. That's another group. The third one I wanted to talk about is connectors. It's just, you review that list of alumni and you say, oh my goodness, I know this person, but they're too busy, but they know everybody. Flag that person, not necessarily to get them to volunteer, but to make the ask of, can you please connect me to people who you know may be interested in specific tasks? Like, do you know anyone who's great with social media? Do you know anyone who's great at doing golf tournaments? And sometimes those connectors, even though they tend to be a bit busier, will know more people and they can sort of provide that connection. So that's just sort of a way to start processing how to identify people. The next thing is asking people if they're willing to volunteer. And this is sort of, there's different ways to do it. The obvious and best way is directly, but again, those list of 1,000 names is overwhelming. So an easy thing to do that can get 0 results or maybe 10 to 15 is just a mass email saying, hi, I'm so-and-so with the chapter. This is what we do. I would love for you to take responsibility for different tasks or work together in accomplishing the goals of BYU alumni. And so you can do that in an email. Another tool, and I've worked with a few chapters on this, is just doing a sort of basic survey of awareness of your chapter, the kinds of activities that they would like, and if they're willing to volunteer. A lot of times only, between 10, 15 people are going to say they're willing to volunteer. And then when you call those people, only a smaller number. But it helps sort of give you some names of people you can start reaching out to and some personal relationships that you can start making. So I think just the first, trying to narrow down people who you can ask and build relationships, those are the things I would do. And then lastly, Karen is sort of a prime example with the narrative she shared, is consider people who have current students at BYU, right? One, they're going to sort of be definitely wanting the same purpose and are sort of aligned with the same goals, and they might want to be a bit more active because they have students there. Okay, the next thing is, now that we've sort of narrowed down what kind of people that you may want to ask to help with your organization, understanding what you need to do before you make the ask and when you make the ask. So the next thing I'm going to do is sort of review some of these things that are on this list. So we're going to talk about framing. How do we sort of come up to someone and talk to them about how we do? how do we develop personal relationships, and then sort of go on to specifically how do we use that list of identified volunteers. Things to think about, specifically word choice, how you should always have an ask, and then if someone says no. So we'll skip to the next slide. Framing. Why is the work important to you? People tend to be drawn to things based on emotions and feelings, not necessarily data and statistics. And that's not to say that data isn't important. I'm a big data nerd. I think data is really important. But when you're trying to talk to people or recruit people, it's the narrative, and it's a personal narrative that's going to help you. I like to think of it, this is from a book that I read about sort of philanthropy, is telling your story, the story of yourself, why I got involved, and the story of you while you were involved with the organization, and then how the person you're talking to can become part of the current story, and how it's made your life better, how you've gained from it, and sort of the important things you do. Like, what does it feel like when you get to give a replenishment grant to a student who may not have had the opportunity to go to college without the replenishment grant? That is a powerful narrative to just say, you know what, I work with BYU alumni in this chapter. We did this 5K. It was a ton of work. It was stressful. But because of that, we raised X amount of dollars, and I got to help this student who went back to school in her 40s and would not have been able to do that without our replenishment grant. And I think you would really like to have the same experience to help the student realize the potential. And isn't it great that we can help more people go to BYU and have the experiences that we have by doing this? So it's important to sort of think of the narrative and the story versus just coming out with, come help us. Give them why. Why should they come help you? So framing is important. The next thing is develop personal relationships. And this might be a little overwhelming at first, and I would just say work on it 1 or 2 at a time, do what's comfortable with you. But one sort of barometer I like to have when I'm sort of asking people is if I don't know what to ask for specifically, I don't know the person well enough to make an ask, right? And I think connectors can sometimes help you sort of skip this step and give you some information on that, is I need to say, you know what, I know Karen is a great person to ask to help me on this presentation because she's passionate about BYU alumni. Or I know so-and-so loves to organize things, and maybe I can help them to organize my golf tournament. And so if you start knowing people and what their talents and skill sets are, it gives you a better sense of the kind of ask that you can make for them. And part of that is listening. I think, I know I struggle with that. Being an active listener can be extremely difficult. So when you are building relationships with people, don't sit there and think, oh, is this the time to ask them? Or I should tell them about this. Listen to what they're saying. Pay attention to what they're saying. Be aware of what they're saying. And be genuine. The best way to get to know people is to actively listen and to care about what they're saying. And then also communicate early and often. When you get sort of this initial list of people who may want to be involved, start talking to them, start reaching out. A lot of times, someone will flag that they want to help out, but they'll say no. But if you start building the relationship, it will help in the future to plant those seeds. Karen, again, her story was a prime example of a seed being planted and then someone continuing that communication. Okay, so you have this list of names and you sort of understand the framework, right? That you need to tell your story, and you need to communicate, and you need to listen. So what are some of the next steps? Some of this is repetitive, so I'm going to skip down to personally invite people to activities that express interest. So this is a beginning step. We're not necessarily asking someone to volunteer, but if you ever know someone or meet someone or talk to someone that just says, you know what, I would really like to attend an activity, make a personal invite or have someone make a personal invite and say, hey, we are having this social. We would love to have you there. Or, hey, we're reviewing replenishment grant activities. We would love to have you there. If someone has ever expressed an interest, sort of put that away in a notebook or your head to know that when we're doing something as a chapter, that I need to make a personal invite to this person. And then with helping, so anyone that expressed an interest to help, sort of a little beyond just being involved with the alumni, reach out to those. And again, I think personally reaching out is always more effective than emails or surveys. I do think that there's a role for everything, but when you're asking people to do specific things, personally is the best way to go. And then be clear about the purpose of the organization, right? This is BYU alumni. We're doing this organization because we want to have the spirit of the why. We're doing this because we're raising money for replenishment grants, because we want to continue the good work of BYU. And with that, I would say be clear with your expectation. Give them a specific assignment with a deadline. So you can say, I need you to call these 4 people by this date, or I need you to sort of help me with sponsors by this date. We can do brainstorming. So scaffold it where they can sort of see what they're needed and what's expected. I think all of us can think of times when we've gone to volunteer and it wasn't clear what they wanted from us. So we just felt like we were standing around. That doesn't help people want to come back. So if you can be clear with expectations and give specific assignments, it sort of can provide a more positive volunteering experiment. And also assign people to help with the above task. Form a committee of askers. Say, you know what, if we can all sort of invite someone we know that might be interested, you can get 2 or 3 people to help you with that. And so as you start building these relationships, you can sort of have other people come on your team and also help with building sort of the network in your area. Word choice. So one of the important things that can happen is you can use word choice that empowers your volunteers and that makes them feel like they're on our team and not that you're just asking for a favor. So sometimes, and it's unfortunate, when you say, hey, can you help me? Someone's thinking you're going to ask for a favor. And even though all of these are a way to ask for help, it gives people a sense of that you're on the team, that you're equal, and that you're working together to the same outcome. So think about saying, hey, can you take responsibility for this? Or I would like you to consider working on this project, or I hope we can work together. I just repeated myself. But just try to say, let's try to not make an imbalance of where I'm your boss and you're below me, but that you're all on the same team when you're talking to volunteers and asking them. You want them to feel empowered and that they have sort of control to make a difference in the organization. This one is probably hard because none of us like to ask for things, but I think as you're sort of developing these relationships, always ask for something. And it doesn't need to be big. It could just even be, can you give me a suggestion of an activity we could have? So here are some words and sentences you can use. Sometimes I think as you get used to asking people, you just don't know what to say. And so here are some ideas. Who else do you know who would want to know about BYU alumni? Expand that network, use who other people know. We've been trying to solve X. Any suggestions? Can I sign you up to help with the next event? Would you like to consider a role on our board? So just sort of think about what you want to ask when you're talking to people. And make sure you try to always ask something, even if it's little, so they can all feel like they're part of the organization. So people are going to say no, and that's hard, and you'll feel rejected. Just a reminder, don't take it personally. I think all of us understand that people are really busy and we're balancing a lot. We have work, we have jobs, we have volunteers, we have social lives, and we're all trying to balance it. So just remember, it's not a personal reflection on you, but I do think it's fair to ask some follow-up questions of sort of like, why not, right? And so here are some ideas of things that you can sort of say. As Karen said in her story, she initially said no, but said she would be willing to help in the future if her circumstances change, if something gets off of your plate. And so it seemed to me that if they do say no, just think of other ways you can say, well, thank you, but a follow-up. And here are some examples, right? It seems as if you like our organization and the work we're doing. Is that true? You know, might make sure that they like the organization. You might find out that some people don't really like the work we're doing, which means that they may not be the best person to have volunteer. You should still have a relationship with that person, but it just may not be the right path for them, and that's okay. You need to know more about our project. They need to maybe know more details, and this is maybe where you get into the data, right? Show them how many people you have in your area, how many replenishment grant scholarships you've done. If you haven't done that, the kind of activities you're having, give them more information. And then make sure the organization is a good fit for your interest, right? Is our organization not a good fit? Is there something we could do differently to make it a good fit? And if they say no, just say, great, I hope you can find an organization that's a better fit, because all of us sort of receive joy from volunteering. And of course, always end with, would you be willing to help in the future if the answer is no? And lastly, I find that this is important, and I know we're trying to do a better job of it here at BYU Alumni, is to celebrate your volunteers. Keep them coming back. If they have a positive experience, they're going to want to do it again. Make it fun. You know, make sure when someone comes to an activity, you greet them and say hello and you know their value. Provide meaningful roles. I touched on this earlier, but it really helps to be specific with the timeline and the due dates and the ask. And then reward them. The volunteers need to feel needed, right? They need to know that they made a difference and that they're appreciated and celebrated. And one of the ways you can do this is show volunteers their success. Show them what they've achieved. Show them that there's more people at this activity. Show them that another student was able to get a replenishment grant. Show them that, you know, through this we recruited more people to come to BYU, right? Show them what they've done and show them that they're successful. And of course, the personal relationship is key. Make sure you have personalized emails and thank you. Make sure that, you know, either you or people on your boards are reaching out to people and thanking them and, you know, inviting them and having a personal relationship. And I think this last one is really important. When you're sort of planning things, you need to plan time just for connections. You need to sort of be very thoughtful about developing relationships with people and saying, I'm going to make this time to have connections. And so that's sort of a brief sort of review of the things that I would think about as you're trying to think about engagement and an outreach. There are some things that you definitely can start doing, you know, and trying to come up with those lists of volunteers that you might want to initially reach out to. And I definitely would encourage you to reach out to us if you need help with that, going back to the initial thing. So Dwayne, I see you're there. Are you willing to unmute yourself and talk about a couple things that you've done in the Phoenix area?
Dwayne.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm kind of just joining, so I apologize. I've been just getting I'm still at work. But, you know, honestly, one of the most important things we did is we created a kind of a Google Doc and sent it to everybody that just said, hey, are you interested in getting involved? And because of that, we've gotten like 23 different people and asked them to kind of specific job duties, responsibilities, where they would like to go. And so every meeting, every time we get together, we had an activity a Thursday, Friday. This week we've had 4 BYU events. And at all the events, we recruit students. So we actually got asked to host the nursing, alumni nursing event on Thursday. And at that event, we asked everybody, hey, would you like to be part of our big team? And we are going to appoint a coordinator to oversee the nursing program. I think the biggest thing that we've tried to do is we've sat down and looked at a structure that's allowing for more people to be involved with specific job duties and responsibility. And I see some of our, like Lori's one of our great examples of that. Hi, Lori. And I think having some of our different volunteers, different people join in, I think is what's really key. And maybe Lori can speak to some of that as well, because I think that's the key. Some of our awesome volunteers that have jumped in and taken on some roles. I can see your eyes, Lori. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, so Lori, can you share a little bit?
Can you hear me, or what do I have to do?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, my girls are at BYU, and so it's mostly communication. I just saw the website. Arizona has a great website on Facebook, and Dwayne does a great job of putting stuff on there and letting everybody see. And so I just saw it that way and said, hey, I can help. And everybody wants to help. I don't think anybody wants to be in charge or have a name, but I think everybody wants to help because it's the spirit of the Y. Everybody wants to do that. So that's the easiest way, I think, is just to have it on Facebook and let everybody see what you're doing. And
ask. I mean, if you just ask that people want to do it. You know, I met another young family last night at the lacrosse game, and they're like, we want to be involved. And they came to the game when they said, just tell us what we can do. You know, over the years, as I work with student leaders and student groups, there's, 3 or 4 kind of ways they want to get involved just because of the cause. Well, BYU is the cause. You know, if they love the why, they want to be connected. Then there's a group of people that just want to be involved in this specific project. One of our volunteers is named Bob Gertz, and he is the BYU lacrosse junkie in our area. And so anytime BYU lacrosse comes, he will jump in and be involved and take leadership and promote and help with that. But you know what? After this game last night, I won't hear from him probably for another year, and he'll call me. And then other people want leadership roles. So I think you have to find out where each individual is motivated, what motivates them, and then find that niche to kind of go from there. I knew that Lori would be great at connections and in celebrations and really having fun. Their family's awesome, and they like to be part of that, and I love to have them around that. So having her set up and do the projects and in her fun attitude is always good. And so I think everybody, Preston is I'm not sure who else is online. Preston is our guru in the PR and marketing, and he knows how to use Twitter, and he knows how to do Facebook, and he knows how to do this. So when I asked him specifically to do that, I said, come and join us. And I think it's really finding the niche and finding the roles and responsibilities and then connecting and then also lightening the load. I mean, we really have a amazing team. You know, Lori, just for example, the other night, Lori and her husband were there, set up, get everything going, and that's critical. And then we had another team that was there kind of finishing it up. So we just did literally an event Thursday night. Saturday was a game. Sunday night we had a fireside, and then last night we had a lacrosse game. And everybody played different roles. And that's the key, is you got to lighten the load and make it something successful and make it something that everybody will enjoy doing.
And have BYU brownies.
Yeah, and recruiter, my wife even made the BYU brownies for the event the other night. But having the, little projects like that, I think it's just getting everybody involved, So I'm not sure that's what you're looking for, but.
No, that's I think, very helpful. Thank you, Dwayne. So are there any questions that you have for me?
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm new to this. And one of the challenges is I don't know how everyone else is bringing people together from out of state more. Maybe I'm a part of this as a not a chapter, so to speak.
Okay.
We're trying of doing this merge between. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so you're with the affinity chapters, sort of
Yeah.
looking at a specific thing. Yes.
Exactly. So we're dealing with alumni all over the place.
Yeah, I would think I would talk to sort of people like Robert and Christina would be good resources here about how you would want to approach that, right? Like if you would want to start locally in your area and grow it, or if you want to do some video conferences with people talking. So I would maybe touch base with Robert, because I think being new is a bit harder to figure out what the next steps are. But you could definitely sort of start with identifying the people you want to reach out to and build relationships with, and then maybe try to have a game plan of what you sort of want it to look like, given, you're dealing with a much broader landscape, right? Because it could be the entire world. And so I would maybe just start with the names and who you'd want to be involved with, and maybe create like an advisory board from there. And then that can sort of give you some support to figure out your next steps. So that would be my advice.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions or anything?
Does anyone had already experiences like this, for example, group conferences with those that are beyond your borders, far away, or activities that are online? I don't know.
I do know that in FHSS, the Family, Homes, and Social Sciences, that they do sort of these Twitter things with speakers and books. Like someone who writes a book on a topic that they're interested will come speak, and that they can ask questions over Twitter to the speaker to do that. So that's something I've known that's worked well, with kind of more of an affinity kind of idea. So that's something that comes to mind.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, can I would, and I've already kind of shared a few ideas, but I can tell you that what we experienced Thursday night was a new experience for me, and I would strongly recommend that as the Alumni Association look at that. But the nursing organization was phenomenal. We had this nursing gathering, and there's 22 different locations throughout the world, throughout the country, and we all zoomed in, and so we heard from the dean. This would be fairly easy, I would think. We could hear from the president, and then every chapter all over the nation could be listening and hearing and kind of feeling. And then we had our own little fellowship. We couldn't get the nurses out of our facility. They would have stayed all night and reminisced and reflected and had fun. And I think that was really amazing. And then their package, they sent me an amazing package of great giveaways, from T-shirts to little thumb drive things to pads to all sorts of stuff. And they even sent me the camera to make sure I could put it on my laptop to make sure we can host the Zoom meeting.
Oh, wow.
I think the power of that one, so the dean spoke, everybody at 7:30 all over. We all logged in, and then we heard from the dean of that college. We sang a song as a group. We listened to I guess they have a nursing song that we all listened to, and then we sang along. They sent me the video to play it along with it. And then they have this whole campaign about nursing to celebrate their 65th anniversary. And we've given them little cards that they take pictures now all over. And that's going to be logged into, I think, their some kind of account. So how we could coordinate those kind of things nationally, definitely use the technology. Zoom, this powerful media right here, is a great way to connect people. And the most important thing, everybody had to know at this time, everybody logged in, and we were able to do that. So I think that's what I would recommend for the whole organization, because it's a great way to have that discussion.
No, thanks for that, Dwayne. Is that helpful, Rachel?
Yeah.
All right. So is there any other questions? If not, I will say goodbye, and everyone have a great evening. And the next training is going to be in June, so you get a bit of a break, and we're going to be looking at best practices with fundraising. So thank you, everybody, for your time and all you do to do the good work of BYU. Our BYU Alumni Organization would be nothing without all of your help. So thank you so much, and have a great night.